Back in January, I covered SD Gundam Chi Generation Cross Race, a really good, really addicting, really grindy sandbox that ticks so many boxes for me I can't help but pop a giant roboner. Since then, there have been a couple of updates, both in content and in function. Some units that were previously only available through promotional codes are now available for free to everyone, and the third and fourth sets of paid DLC from the Season Pass have been released. Some are better than others, but the good stuff is really good. Yeah, the alternate forms of H units still don't show up, and the Chi Self-Perfect pack is mostly recycled from Genesis, but the new stuff is up there with the best. Like the God Gundam. Oh. When Mobile Fighter Chi Gundam was licensed in the West, there were a few name changes. Notably, God Gundam became Burning Gundam, Spiegel Gundam became Shadow Gundam, and Devil Gundam became Dark Gundam. Apparently, this was because the Gundam Death Scythe Hell Gunpla kits were previously the source of controversy due to its religious themes, and some stores straight up refused to sell the kits. That said, I understand changing God and Devil, but Spiegel is just German for mirror, so I dunno. But more importantly, the tradition of characters calling out the God Finger attack is alive and well, which ironically brings attention to the name change. And yes, this includes characters that never appeared in previous games, which is surprising considering that the God Gundam is a completely optional DLC unit. Quality of life improvements such as speeding up battle animations have been added, and you can now completely skip the damage numbers on the map. There's some new settings for custom BGM and a free DLC with music from older games. The rest are exactly as they were, but strangely enough the War's title theme is a new arrangement. .60 is the latest update, adding a number of things. The big one is a limit break option for both pilots and units. By spending some doge, their max level is unlocked from 99 to 999, in case you couldn't break the game in half hard enough already. Individual stats previously had a maximum of 999, but can now go up to 9999. But no, awakened weapons don't seem to scale beyond 999 awakens, so that at least isn't getting any more broken. Pilots start gaining breakthrough points, allowing them to raise their stats even higher. You can still increase them with money, but not beyond an extra 999 points. Breakthrough points can also be spent to unlock ability slots, but only to a maximum of 9 in total. This means that pilots with fixed abilities have less free slots than those with none. Units continue to gain upgrade points like normal, but Limit Break unlocks an extra slot for modifications. The update also adds new options for custom characters. All designs now have a uniform and a pilot suit instead of only one or the other, and some can toggle their helmet on or off. Making them completely silent is also an option now. The real meat of this video is the expansion pack, a new paid DLC, and unlike the Season Pass, it's actually reasonably priced at €8. Whether it's worth buying is a different question. The expansion pack is an all-rounder, with 5 new stages, 1 new difficulty, and various things like units, quests and dispatch missions. Each of the 4 timelines gets their own stage, with some very light crossover plot. 2314 over is the most interesting one. It's the only stage with characters that didn't appear in the base game's stories, and it has a very interesting what-if scenario where Fun Spark is present during the invasion of the Space Needles. Setsuna then appears to save his crazy ass from getting assimilated, before setting out to communicate with the Needles. All 4 stages are fine from a gameplay perspective, aside from 2314 over's annoying as balls secret mission, but they are all underwhelming when it comes to story. I said they have very light crossover plot, and that's because the characters from different works barely interact with each other besides acknowledging their existence. A lot of missed potential here. The final stage of the expansion pack is a follow-up to the base game's final stage. And it's just a rehash of that. And nope, the original characters don't have any plot whatsoever, they are just there as pilots. Speaking of which, I guess I'm gonna spoil Chi Generation World and Overworld for the sake of context. But both the site and the game itself already kind of do it, so yeah. Uploadia first appeared in World. She is the neural network in charge of the Generation System, a machine that records data from many different universes. Her duty is to guide mankind towards the right path, and the Alpha's Gundam served as the terminal for controlling the Generation System. But the Alpha's Gundam went bonkers, and by using the world signal, it began to transform the real world into a false one. So it's up to the player's team to bring it back to normal. In the end, it's discovered that the Barbatos, not that one, has also gone bonkers and screwed things up, I guess. The story isn't directly connected, but she appears once again in Overworld. It begins with an obviously evil lady calling herself Uploadia, warning that the worlds are about to be enveloped in conflict. An event called Overimpact is triggered, causing the heroes to lose sight of their enemies and fight amongst themselves. She proclaims that an evil being is looking to infiltrate the core of the Generation System and attempting to corrupt it, and this leads to the player chasing after Barbadoro. Meanwhile, Code Phoenix and his pet Pokémon attempt to open the door to the Generation System. They plan to do this by using his Code of Deliverance, or Liberation whatever, to unleash Barbadoro's power on the door, but the system's defense systems impede his progress. After Barbadoro takes a trip to the recycle bin, this Uploadia regains her lost code, and in the world's most overly predictable twist, it turns out that she is an evil bitch who wants to rule the world. Her real identity is Code Amelius, holder of the Code of Betrayal and the one who is actually trying to take full control of the Generation System. She impersonated the real Uploadia, who was forced to take the form of Code Phoenix's little friend. After giving her a smacking, she loses her code and reverts back into a scared little girl, because of course she does. Feeling completely lost, she escapes to the very first Generation System, which had been abandoned. Code Phoenix saves Amelius, tells her that everything will be alright, and they sail home to Mommy Uploadia. Happy end. Code Amelius also piloted the Queen Amelius, but unfortunately it isn't present in this DLC, and neither is the real Barbatos because Iron-Blooded Orphans happened. Thanks, asshole! But on the bright side, Child Form Amelius is actually playable this time around. Hidden in Overworld's files is a bunch of assets that indicated she was supposed to be playable at one point, but that didn't happen. But plot or no plot, the big cheese is the new Inferno difficulty, which is a dumpster fire. Inferno is divided into levels, starting at 1 and going up to 100. Beating any stage on your highest available level unlocks the next one. Any stage is fine, as Inferno level progress is shared between all of them. Inferno does two things. One is nerfing the player's side. Stats like Command and Awaken have their effects greatly reduced, so the areas for link-up and support attacks start much tighter, and the range of Awaken weapons don't cross the entire galaxy anymore. Both Warship and Raid link-ups are weaker as well, certain abilities have a lower limit, and map weapons that restore HP can't be used. The intention here is obviously to put the strategy back in strategy RPG, making positioning more vital than ever. Area sizes get their balls sliced right off until you build up your team's stats up to the new standards, and throwing your ace into a group of enemies is likely to end badly. The other thing it does is increase enemy stats. And this is where the DLC makes me look stupid. In my original video I explained how the game's exploitability worked in its favor, but now Inferno comes along and kicks it in the face, because it feels like there's 4 or 5 difficulties missing between Hell and Inferno. Units that could easily take on the strongest enemies in the game without missing an attack or getting hit even once on Hell difficulty can barely score a 50% chance of hitting the weakest grunts in the game at Inferno level 1. This isn't challenging, this is being unreasonable. The easiest stages have enemy stats starting at around 1000, and it jumps another couple hundred with every stage, with the last few having stats above 3000. Bump this up to Inferno 75, which gives you the best abilities, and you're looking at 3000 for the easiest stages. This would be fine if the game gave you proper tools to counter the bollocks, but enemies just keep growing stronger and your team struggles to keep up with their stats and exclusive abilities. The result is that Inferno over-centralizes certain tactics because enemy stats grow so high that anything other than the cheesiest, most tryhard strategies will have a bad time. My experience with Inferno involved grinding the easiest stages over and over again, slowly rising through Inferno to unlock new modifications. This is because the rest of the quests involve beating the hardest stages on Inferno, and that is something I wouldn't be able to do for another 4, 5 or 100 hours. But I quickly realized that, despite being nerfed, warship link-ups are still the most effective strategy by far, which made the command stat a priority for the captain. Skills that would be overkill on the regular difficulty suddenly became my best friends as I abused accuracy and damage boosts to obliterate everything with a warship link-up. It still gives a ton of XP, so my warship and captain jumped into the stratosphere while everyone else tried to cope with their piss-poor hit rates that kept dropping like a meteor with every Inferno level. Breakthrough points can't be used to raise crew stats anyway, making them mostly useless for the warship's other members. Raid groups have it much worse since deployment slots remain the same, and skills only affecting the user means you can't just apply a hit rate bonus to your entire squad like you can with warship groups. Even the order in which you acquire new modifications incentivizes abusing warship link-ups, because it gives you really good warship-only modifications before it starts giving you decent stuff for your units. I'd also like to remind you that all units who participate in link-ups get the kills added to their own count, further increasing the effects of Super Pilot, which got nerfed but is still insanely good compared to almost everything else. Even when everything else results in 0 damage, Super Pilot still causes several thousands. Inferno reminds me of myself at social events, because it seems to be in a bad spot and doesn't know what it's doing. It was designed to nerf the most overpowered tools available to the player, while simultaneously incentivizing the player to use nothing but those same tools. Many of the new abilities and modifications are also simple stat boosts, which eventually get outclassed, just like the ones in the base game, because flat values don't scale and everything is built around the stat inflation. It's all about stacking the strongest boosts and cheesing everything. Abilities like the Nano-Laminate Armor, that is the defining trait of post-disaster units, are pretty much useless. And by this point in the game, you have already completed most progression elements. There's no more story to see, no more pilots or units to discover, no new mechanics to play around with, and it discourages the player from doing whatever they want, going against the main appeal of the series. It's doubly disappointing because a highly scalable difficulty would be a perfect fit for chi generation. Like I said in the original video, the player makes their own difficulty, so being able to choose from really easy to brutally hard would be a great way for the player to tailor the experience to their taste. I'm fully aware that Cross Race is a grindy game, and I made it clear in my original video. But one thing is being grindy, and another thing is being an unrewarding slog. There was no need for this double whammy of player nerfs and enemy stat boosts. If Inferno level 1 stats remained on the same ballpark as Hell, most problems wouldn't have existed. I have no problem with the ridiculous stats on Inferno 100 because that's the point. I just want a difficulty curve to exist. It does get better once your units cross the 3000 mobility threshold, since you'll be able to clear several more quests to get new modifications, and you'll have more money and breakthrough points to spend on pilot stats, but it takes so much time and grinding to get there, and after that the challenge is simply grinding your mobility as high as possible, because even at max level you only get enough points to max out one stat. Dispatch missions help a bit too, but even on Inferno you barely get any more cooldown tokens to speed things up. Besides that, I want to point out that the English translation is pretty bad. You have awkward formatting, inconsistent terminology, and a lot of new abilities and modifications being completely goddamn wrong. Which I almost wish I had stayed ignorant of, because in almost every case the actual bonus is lower. But worst of all, after updating to 1.60, the game tells you that your version 1.5 save file will be converted to the new version, and warns you that your save data from before 1.50 will be backed up, and then asks you if you want to continue with your data from before 1.50, or otherwise it will start all over. The next logical step would be to say no to this because you want to use the save data from 1.50 rather than from a previous version, right? But if you do that, the game restarts from the beginning, and God have mercy if you don't exit back to the title screen right away, because if you save now, your precious data is gone forever because the translation is such a colossal screw-up. To throw in some nitpicks, I guess it's a shame that the original characters don't have their unique skills from Overworld, or that Genocide Grandpa doesn't get his nukes. Also, clearing a DLC stage on Hell difficulty doesn't unlock the next one, but the developers are working on an update to fix that. Either way, it goes without saying that the expansion pack is mostly intended for people who have finished the game and want to continue racing their teams. That said, while I love the original units and the new stages are okay, Inferno is a mess. A really boring one. Cross Race is still a game that I can recommend to those looking for something to keep them occupied for hundreds of hours, and the free updates have only made it better. The paid DLC on the other hand isn't essential, and it's better off on a sale unless you really like some of the units and characters. But whichever way you go, the expansion pack is likely the final piece of content for one of my favorite games of 2019. It's sad to say goodbye to it on a sour note, but life goes on. I know that we'll meet again in the future when the next game in the series comes around. And when that happens, I'm confident that today's mistakes will become tomorrow's success story.